Hello everyone, welcome to Module 1. In this module we're going to talk a lot about how you're going to use supervision most effectively both in your practicum and in your future life experience at your job. I hope this will be a good module, and I hope it'll really set the stage for some of the things that you do in your practicum. At the end of this module you should have an idea of some things that you want to change about your supervision or that you want to take more advantage of in your supervision. Let's talk a little bit about the purpose of supervision. There's three things that I want to talk about in terms of the objectives of supervision. The first objective of supervision is to learn your job, to learn the characteristics of your job, to learn how to better do your job, to learn what you need to do in your job. The second one is some professional skills. Among these professional skills are not only ethics and the ethical decision-making process, but also the procedures that take place at your place of work, and also professional skills in terms of interpersonal skills and better ways of conducting your job, not in terms of policies, procedures, and ways that you're going to do things, but in terms of ways of connecting with people, ways of engaging people and involving people. The last reason for and the last function of supervision is for self-care. Self-care is really important. Self-care will help you to be a stronger professional, and it also help you to avoid burnout. The reason that I put self-care as one of the functions of supervision, especially during your internship in the early stages of your career, is that it's important for you to be able to take care of yourself in the things that you're doing, and sometimes you need to consult with somebody else, and your supervisor is the one to do that with. We're going to talk about three different characteristics of effective supervision if you're going to meet the objectives that we discussed earlier. The first is the relationship of the supervisor and supervisee and the dynamic in the relationship of supervision. The second is characteristics of a good supervisor, and last is the characteristics that you need to have in order to get the most out of your supervision. First of all, in terms of the relationship, one really important aspect, or really foundational, is the ability of the relationship to be safe and open. If you're going to talk to your supervisor and bring issues to your supervisor, it's so important that you have a safe and you feel safe in that relationship. If you feel like anything is going to come back to damage your career, or that there are reasons why you shouldn't be talking to your supervisor, it's going to impact your ability to get good supervision. And that's really crucial. The second thing is that the supervision needs to be developmentally appropriate. In the beginning stages of your supervision, you want your supervisor to be providing a lot of information about how you can do things. After you've been at your internship for a while, or after you've been on the job site for a while, you want your internship supervisor or your job supervisor to be providing you with questions to facilitate your process of thinking through the issues and coming to conclusions of what you should do by yourself. And so it really is important that it can be developmentally appropriate. Now, the other real important characteristic of supervision, it needs to be both formal and informal. The reason that it needs to be formal is because you need to have something set up so you know when and where you're going to meet with your supervisor and how that meeting is going to look, what the content is going to be discussed, and everything else. During that formal interview, also, you're going to be talking with your supervisor about the things that you need to do your job better. If you don't have articulated when, where, and what's going to be discussed, it's difficult to get that done. The other really crucial piece is that informal supervision needs to take place. Now, informal supervision is crucial because there are times in which things occur and you need to have some feedback before next Tuesday at 1 o'clock. So it's really important that you have an informal ability to approach your supervisor and say, I need some quick feedback, and you can do that. Now, in order for that to happen, and in order for the other characteristics of good supervision to take place, there's some characteristics of both the supervisor and the supervisee that need to be present. One of the first characteristics of the supervisor is that they need to be approachable. If you do not have a relationship where you feel safe, as we discussed, with the supervisor, it's going to limit your ability to approach that supervisor with questions. Now, there are often times when we have a supervisor that we don't necessarily feel comfortable with, and maybe that's the case in where you're at right now. One important thing is that you can have an impact on how much the supervisor is open with you and how safe you feel in that. The way that you impact that is by having appropriate relationship and appropriate behavior on your part. And so your part of that approachable aspect of the supervisor is that you must be teachable. If you enter your internship thinking that you know all the answers, your supervisor is going to pick up on that, and it's going to limit the degree to which they're going to allow you to feel safe because they don't feel safe. Their role is to teach you, to train you, to supervise and mentor you. Their role is not to have you teach, train, supervise, and mentor them. Okay? And so you being teachable is really, really important. The second thing that's important for a good supervisor is that they be informed. A supervisor needs to know about the job. A supervisor needs to know what their responsibilities are and what your responsibilities are. Most of the time, it is because of this information that they are made your supervisors. So this usually isn't a worry. But the only reason I bring this up is because sometimes in agencies you work, supervision is established through formal means and there isn't any way to change that. Other times, you can request to have somebody be your supervisor. And so when you're thinking about who to request, pay attention to the people that are good at what they do. And this relates to the third characteristic of a good supervisor, is that that supervisor will conduct his or her job the way you want to conduct yours. And so as you look around in the agency, pay attention to who does their job like you think you will do yours, who is effective at engaging families, what do they do in order to be effective, who treats others like you want to treat others, so on and so forth. And so think about the type of professional you want to be and think about who in that agency acts like that and treats others like that. Now, as part of that, your role then, again, is to be aware and to pay attention. That relates to an essence of investment. You have to be invested in good supervision. You have to be there in order to get good supervision and get something out of it. The last characteristic that you need to have, besides being teachable and being invested, is that you need to be open and humble. Now, one of the flaws of supervision or the use of supervision for a lot of people is that they want to look good to their supervisor. Now, while this might be a natural knee-jerk reaction to supervision, especially if our supervisor is somebody that we have a lot of respect for, we want them to think we're a good professional. We want them to know that we do good things professionally. There's a tendency when this is the case, and that when the professional has a need to be approved of, that they're going to bring their easiest cases to supervision. They're going to bring those cases that they need the least amount of help for. Now, this is the worst possible use of supervision. Remember when we talked about using supervision, we talked about it being for the purpose of giving you job training, for the purpose of helping you learn professional skills, and self-care. Now, if you're bringing the easiest cases that you have to supervision, the supervisor doesn't help you learn the job with the most difficult cases, which are always the hardest, which always require the most effective use of your strategies. Second of all, they don't help you deal with professional issues, such as professional skills that you need to hone, or ethical issues and the decision-making process for making ethical decisions. Third, they don't deal with self-care issues because you're afraid to bring things up to them. And so the last characteristic that you need to have is that you need to be humble. When you approach a situation with a supervisor, if you have an idea of something that you believe might help the agency out, don't go and tell them that you found something that will help them out. Go and ask them if they would like to hear an idea that you've had. Tell them that as you've worked there and as you've seen things, you've noticed that this was a challenge for some of the people, or for accounting, or for records keeping, or whatever the case may be. And tell them that you took initiative to try to figure something out and want to get their feedback on what you're proposing. Now, the important piece about that is that you have to be willing to listen to their feedback. You have to be teachable. You have to be humble enough to say that if they say, no, that's not going to work because of several factors, that you accept and respond appropriately to that. Now, this doesn't mean that if a supervisor asks you to do something unethical, that you're going to go ahead and do it. Obviously not, right? But it does mean that you respect your supervisor, that you treat them with an appropriate level of professional respect, and that they are your authority figure, and you need to treat them as such. If you have these characteristics, that you're teachable, that you're invested in the situation, that you're trying to be humble and work through the issues that you have, and if you try to help and find a supervisor that is kind of like what you want to be, you will be able to get some effective supervision that will move you from where you're at right now and help develop in you much better clinical and professional skills.